Everyone. Hello, thank you for joining. We'll be getting started in just a minute. Hello, thank you for joining. Welcome. Okay, as people trickle in, we will just get started since it's 2 after. Hello, welcome everyone to our May webinar. My name is Sabrina. I am a research project coordinator for Rutgers Cooperative Extension. This webinar series is part of a USDA grant between Ohio State University and Rutgers University. During this webinar, we've been showcasing the efforts of extension groups, university researchers, and other leaders in the food and sustainability industry who are making significant strides in combating the consumer and food waste issue. So today we are joined by Angel Veza. Angel serves as ReFed's Director of Innovation Initiatives, working to catalyze the adoption of food waste solutions. Angel will share how innovators are reimagining the food system to prevent waste, reduce, rescue surplus food, and unlock new value across the supply chain. As a reminder, the presentation slides and recording will be sent out via email later this month. I'm going to enable the chat and Q&A feature in just a minute, so feel free to type in any questions you have while the presentation is going on, and we'll try our best to get to some of those questions at the end. One other thing is that this is the last webinar for year one of our series. We'll be starting again in October of this year. We do have a survey here. If you have some time to fill it out, we would really appreciate your feedback. It's just a couple of questions to help us guide year two of our webinar series. So I will stop sharing. And Angel, it's all yours.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Can you all see my screen okay? Is it coming through all right?
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, it's a real pleasure to be part of this webinar series. As Sabrina mentioned, my name is Angel Veza, and I'm the Director of Innovation at ReFed. To share a little bit about myself, I actually used to be a chef. I worked primarily in fine dining restaurants, and I also spent some time cooking with Compass Group, specifically at Restaurant Associates at the Google New York City office. And as you can imagine, working in fine dining and corporate offices like Google, there is tremendous amounts of food waste. And I became very passionate about addressing this problem, which is what led me to ReFed. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with ReFed, I just want to give you a quick background on the work that we do. So we're a national nonprofit working to advance data-driven solutions to prevent food waste in the United States. And at the foundation of our work is our data and insights, which fuels our insights engine. It's this online data and solutions hub for food loss and waste, really designed to help people take meaningful action. And using that knowledge, we work with food businesses and other waste generators to accelerate their food waste reduction initiatives. And then we also collaborate and drive connections among different stakeholders from across the food system, ranging from government agencies to solution providers, to people in the academic space. And, we really do that through our Food Waste Action Network and through our annual Food Waste Solution Summit, which is coming up in June. I definitely recommend you come if you can make it. And we also work with capital providers to drive the $16 billion of funding needed annually to really scale innovation to food waste. And in fact, ReFed is a funder itself. So I actually manage our Catalytic Grant Fund, and I'll talk a bit more about that later in the presentation. So why does ReFed exist? Why do we even have this organization focused on food waste? Well, as you all know, about 1/3 of all food produced goes uneaten. And when we're wasting food, we're essentially wasting money. So our latest numbers show that all of that uneaten food costs us nearly $400 billion. Now, you'll hear me talk a lot about surplus food, and what I mean by that is food that goes unsold or unused by a business, or that goes uneaten at homes or in restaurants, including food and inedible parts that are donated or fed to livestock or repurposed to other uses. So what you're seeing here is that 85% of surplus food goes to what we would call our waste destinations, like composting and AD. And within that, still a majority of surplus food is ending up in landfills. And as we all know, as food decomposes in landfills, it's really emitting this harmful greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to our climate crisis. So in 2023, which is our latest data showing us that surplus food is actually responsible for 230 million metric tons of total greenhouse gases, including 2.7 million metric tons of methane emissions. So that's kind of what we're seeing happening in terms of that surplus food. But of course, that's generated across the entire supply chain. And you'll notice that a lot of it is happening at the consumer level. And this number that you're seeing here on the screen represents both food waste at home and plate waste that's generated when consumers eat out at restaurants. And today, we're really going to take a closer look at what's happening both in the homes and in consumer-facing businesses like restaurants and retail. And to do that, we're going to go on what I would like to call the consumer food journey. And we're going to talk about the solutions and initiatives that are emerging to address these challenges that we're seeing. And then what are the barriers to adopting these solutions and what's really needed to help them scale. So let's kind of embark on this journey together. And let's start from the beginning, right? So it's time to eat, and a consumer usually decides, do they want to eat out or do they want to eat at home? And just to start out, let's say we're not feeling like cooking, we want to eat out. So a person chooses to eat out and they go to a restaurant and they enjoy the food, but sometimes they're leftovers. So maybe they're bringing them home, storing the food at home. But in some cases, there's plate waste. And that's left for the restaurant to ultimately manage, and they end up throwing away that food. And that plate waste, again, it's the food that the consumer pays for, but it goes uneaten and they leave it on their plate. So when we are looking at different innovations that are happening for this, we're normally seeing this happening for full service restaurants, because that's where a lot of the plate waste is happening, is at those types of settings. And there are a number of challenges with this, right? When people try to think of a solution to plate waste, the common idea is, well, why don't we just offer smaller portion sizes? But here's the challenge though, right? Smaller portion sizes can go against a restaurant's value proposition to their guests. So, take a restaurant chain like Buffalo Wild Wings. Their value proposition is delicious wings, and a lot of them at a relatively affordable price. And maybe for a few bucks, they'll even make it a combo. And while you're there, they'll offer you drinks and you can watch sports, all of that. So that's their value proposition. That's what makes them money. But the moment that they start to offer smaller sizes, they're decreasing consumer satisfaction rates. And this is an issue for independent restaurants too, not just chains, because there isn't a demand for smaller portion sizes. I've worked in multiple restaurants and again in food service settings, and I've never, ever heard of a situation where a guest complains to the general manager that the kitchen gave them too much food and they want their money back, right? Like that's never the case. In fact, oftentimes customers either take the leftovers home, like we talked about, or they leave just feeling like their money was well spent and they go on with their lives. So there's not really a demand for smaller portion sizes, but what many restaurants are doing are exploring how they can actually leverage AI. Because as you can see here on this matrix, in the top right corner, that's kind of the target that they're going for, right? Because with AI, there's an opportunity to both increase operational efficiency, so you're saving on labor costs, but also create strong customer connections. And they can do this by using AI to provide personalized meal suggestions, which can help with customized portion sizing and still gives the customer what they want. So one example of this is Wingstop. They had what they called their kind of wing calculator. And if you're not familiar with Wingstop, it's a quick service restaurant chain, and they sell chicken wings. And what they did was they wanted to help their customer decide how much food they should be ordering based on how hungry they feel. So you can see here on the screen, they had, I'm just feeling snacky, a little peckish, or I'm starving. And then based on what the customer says, they'll provide them with a tailored recommendation and the number of people that are being fed and how hungry they feel. So, the challenge they're removing is, plate waste, which is a result of not being able to accurately forecast how much food a guest wants. And they're providing this really unique value of giving the guests tailored menu options. And the behavior change for the restaurant is that once they gather all of that information, they can improve their ordering and prep, again, improving that operational efficiency while still giving that guest exactly what they want. And of course, there are a number of other benefits to AI that restaurants are seeing, in addition to reducing plate waste, right? You're having that predictive analytics, you're forecasting demand, and you can adjust your orders appropriately. Now, often paired with AI is kitchen automation and robotics. We're seeing a lot of that now, a lot of interest in that. And it can do a lot, right? It can help remove human error and make sure labor is being put toward customer-centered activities, really making sure that the experience for the customer is of high quality. And it can also be used for precise portioning, consistent cooking, and any repetitive tasks. So of course, these types of solutions are not for all restaurants, and it's definitely not a silver bullet. But what I will say is, depending on what the restaurant concept is, it has the potential to be a real game changer. So to give you an example, I was talking with a restaurant owner who runs multiple pizza shops. And originally had a full staff, but now he's started to use robotics to prep and make the pizza dough. And so that's actually resulted in more consistent dough, so you're not wasting as much, but also happier staff that can really spend time with the customer. Because as you can imagine, making pizza dough all day long can be really physically taxing. And in fact, one of their employees actually started having issues with their elbow, and that's what sparked this idea to look into robotics, and it's really paid off for them. So when looking at innovations, again, we're not just reducing plate waste, right? We want to make sure there's a number of other things too when considering innovations. We want to make sure there's that return on investment, whether that's through labor savings or, food savings. And this can also, again, help make sure that there's a value add to the customer. But of course, too, it really needs to be easily integrated into a restaurant's operation so it's not disrupting their flow of work. And it needs to match that restaurant concept so that you're walking in and still having that full experience. So that's kind of what that looks like for that dining out, helping to reduce plate waste. But let's imagine a different situation. Let's imagine that maybe a consumer wants to cook at home. So they want to go out and buy groceries for whatever they're going to have that night. And now we're going to talk about, what happens in grocery settings. So when you go grocery shopping, a couple things that might be going through your head is, man, how fresh is this food and how much do I need to prepare? And some solutions that we're seeing that really are addressing this to help with that decision making are really coming through in packaging, specifically active and intelligent packaging and packaging design. So let's first talk about active packaging. So one common solution we've been seeing are stickers that extend the shelf life of fresh produce. You simply peel and apply the sticker to the produce. The nice thing is that this can be put on products with minimal disruption to operations, and the stickers are food safe. So a lot of them were actually designed with plants in mind. So you can imagine plants naturally produce volatile compounds to protect themselves from harmful environmental conditions. And what these companies have done is actually identified those compounds and developed formulations to fight post-harvest disease and or stimulate the produce's natural immune system. And they are engineered so they're controlling the release delivery system so it can be applied to a lot of different types of surfaces. And in fact, one retailer did a study and found that by using stickers like these, and extending the shelf life of fresh produce, it helped increase consumer satisfaction because they were able to still enjoy that produce because they had that extra time to enjoy it because of that shelf life extension. And then there's also other different types of solutions that can be used for proteins. So we've seen companies actually come up with a film that replaces plastic, and it can increase the shelf life of seafood. And again, it's not disrupting normal operations because that film is just, again, being replaced with that plastic. So they don't need new equipment, they don't need new processes. So these are the types of things that are, again, helping the customer make sure that they can have fresh food for an extended amount of time so they can use it at home. The other is intelligent packaging. So when I think about intelligent packaging, it's like that sniff test to know if something is still good without actually opening the package. And so these solutions can help track the quality of perishable food products, especially, highly sensitive ones like meat and poultry and dairy. And again, they can be embedded into existing packaging design. So one company developed these labels for dynamic shelf life, and they use these biosensor labels that change color based on gas levels that are indicating whether or not the product is still safe to eat. And so they've been able to apply this to things like ground beef. And the label is just placed inside the package and attached to the top of the cover. And as the meat degrades and produces those volatile organic compounds, it reacts with the ink and the ink changes colors. So it's very accurate in terms of how fresh that food is. So it's a great visual solution, but they also have digital solutions too, through RFID technology connecting to smartphones, and they have larger digital systems that can display and capture data in really large volumes. So that's still very early stages, but something that we've been seeing come to market. And then I'll quickly go through just package design. They're constantly evolving with the goal to optimize food packaging so that consumers are using all of the food product. So a key strategy could be resealability, right? Consumers report a lot of problems with packaging that's not adequate to keep food fresh. And so they want more resealable and reclosable packaging. Other key strategies are like portions and pack sizes. So smaller pack sizes can help reduce food waste because consumers, who sometimes cook too much food just by default to the quantity in the package. And so they want the option to have smaller portions or portion packs so they can cook as much as they need when they need. And then, of course, access to contents, right? So being able to easily access all the contents in the package is one of the most important features because, of course, if the product is difficult to access, the packaging hasn't done the job of delivering the content. So there's a lot of new different types of solutions to help make it easier to get all of the content out of that package so that you can use all of it at home. So with anything that we're looking at, right, we want to make sure that the food is safe to eat, that we're getting accurate information when it comes to these different types of packaging solutions. And of course, it needs to be really easy and simple to include in operations. It helps simplify the decision making for the consumer and really meets their needs and their way of how they like to cook at home. And so, okay, so we've looked at packaging in the grocery store. Now, what happens when we get home and we bring those groceries, right? You might store some of that food. Maybe you don't need all of it, and then you're probably going to cook a lot of it for what you want for dinner. And so let's look at some of the things that are happening at that household level. So when it comes to storing and cooking food, right, there's some management of the inventory, there's some meal planning involved, and there are a lot of different things that we're seeing. There's smart storage containers, your all-in-one mobile apps, and smart fridges. You've probably seen a lot of these already. Maybe you've seen ads for them. But with smart storage containers, it's one of those newer solutions that basically, when you have leftovers, whether it's from the restaurant or you have leftover carrots, sometimes you might be really great at remembering when you put things in, but if you're like me and you can't keep track of it all, sometimes you might need a solution like this that will give you that extra assistance to remember when exactly you stored that food in the fridge and what's in your fridge. And then these storage units are also connected to your phone, so it can send you reminders of what you have and by when you should be eating it. So there are a few of these smart storage containers coming to market. And then, of course, there's a lot of apps out there. The most recent type that we've been seeing are these like all-in-one apps that help you with your meal planning, your shopping list, remember what's in your fridge, and they'll even give you recipes to help you figure out what to do with any miscellaneous carrots or celery and what to make with it, because it might not fit into an existing recipe you have. And they call it kind of this all-in-one mobile kitchen. And then, of course, we've seen a lot more smart fridges. The difference with these is that these fridges have cameras. So when you're out at that grocery store and you can't remember if you have something, you can literally look inside your fridge from wherever you are using your phone. And you can add food items and set expiration dates for them and use this shopping list and meal planning features. So similar to the app, but very much connected to your fridge through cameras. So of course, there's all of that when it comes to cooking at home, but then sometimes you have these inedible trimmings and maybe you don't have time to repurpose them. And of course, life gets busy. So even though you might store food, you might forget about it and it goes bad, or you didn't have time to eat it. And so you do ultimately have to discard it because it's no longer safe to eat. So what do we do with that? Well, there have been some newer food recyclers. I'm sure many of you have seen them. It is a strong alternative option if you don't have a composting program in your area. They are relatively easy to use, and some studies have demonstrated actual behavior change, because as the user continues to use the appliance, they become more and more aware of what they're throwing away. And then they become motivated to actually throw away less. And so the studies have shown that the number of times a cycle is run is fewer over time. So there is some evidence that these can actually help prevent food waste through that type of feedback loop. All right, so we've covered a number of different types of solutions from restaurants and retail and at the household level. But of course, these are still kind of early. So a number of the challenges really, again, early in growth stages. So they still need a lot of way to go. And a lot of that's because there are adoption barriers. And I would say there are a few reasons to that. One, they're still expensive. So they are price prohibitive. There's a lack of automation, especially for some of those household solutions that we're talking about, where it still requires you to input information and still keep track of things. It's not automated, so it's adding more work for the consumer, which can be a barrier. The other thing too, though, is that when we're talking about this, while we all care about reducing food waste, this isn't always a pressing problem for the consumer. And so they're not incentivized to actually purchase or engage in some of these things. And so that's a big issue too. That's not solving a pressing need for them right now. So those are the number of challenges, but there are some ways to potentially help these solutions really grow and scale. One is catalytic funding, which I will talk a bit more here in a second, and the other is pilots and partnerships. So let's first talk about catalytic funding. So at ReFed, we talk a lot about the importance of this, and it's really to help scale food waste solutions. So ReFed's analysis shows that $16 billion in annual funding is needed to accelerate solutions to food waste. Of that total amount, $3.4 billion annually is needed in the form of catalytic funding. So this is capital that's patient, it's risk tolerant, and it's flexible to allow it to unlock impact over time. And a significant form of that does need to come in the form of grant funding. And that's why we launched our catalytic grant fund. So we really focus on opportunities where our funding and support can unlock additional capital and impact by providing grants and wraparound support to initiatives that can really both reduce food waste and greenhouse gas emissions. So actually, our next open call is really targeting methane emissions, and we're looking at two high impact opportunities to tackle them head on. One is advancing food recycling infrastructure and innovation, and the other is really boosting efficiency and waste reduction in beef and dairy supply chains. Because our recent analysis shows that improved recycling and diversion is one of the most immediate and cost-effective strategies to reduce methane today. And while tackling loss within beef and dairy systems can unlock major long-term impact, we're not there yet, right? So we need both. So we are exploring these two angles for the next open call. And if anyone on this call really feels like they have an expertise in either of these areas, would love to talk with you about what we're hoping to do with the grant fund. Now, another good example of catalytic funding, but also pilots and partnerships, I would say, is Cornell University's Grow New York program. It's a business competition really focused on growing an enduring food and ag innovation cluster in the New York region. And the competition really does attract innovative, high-growth food and ag tech startups from across the globe. And it engages them in New York's rapidly growing ecosystem, but also with its local farmers and other food businesses in the area. So as an applicant, you do have a chance to win up to $1 million. There's that catalytic funding. But finalists also get to go through a really robust program where they get paired with a specific mentor that works with them through the entire program. So you get that really customized support, and you get to speak with prospective customers and partners in the region. And that type of experience is really invaluable to a startup. So the program is actually so meaningful that several finalists that I've spoken to have actually told me that they already feel like they've won just by participating in that program. And it's really that partnership and pilot piece that is making it feel so meaningful for them already, that even if they don't win the money, they got so much out of it. But it is a really nice way to leverage kind of a university's network and through this type of platform. And that kind of brings me to my next point. If you are in an organization that's really interested in hosting some sort of innovation challenge or competition, we'd love to support you. So, REFED's actually been part of Grow New York's programming, and we also run full challenges. We've run one with the wonderful company, and we've helped advise several challenges, including one with Lineage Food Chain Innovation Challenge. And so wanted to share that with you as opportunities to get involved, but just to kind of wrap up and share some final thoughts. I would say that, even though we looked at a bunch of different types of solutions at different parts of the supply chain, really we need a holistic solution stack, right? We really need to prevent food loss. That's really going to give us our biggest bang for the buck, right? It's going to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, has cost savings associated, economic opportunities. But of course, we know that we will also need to continue to divert food waste from landfills. So we really need to recycle anything remaining. And when we're looking at innovative solutions, we really need to make sure that there's a value add to the customer, especially if you're a food business, and that it's solving a really pressing need. And the reason these two pieces are so important is because there must be a willingness to pay for that solution. And then, of course, we want it to be accessible and simple and easy to use. Otherwise, even if it's cheap and affordable, no one is actually going to end up using it if it's too difficult to access. So as you in your work look at all the different types of innovation solutions that might come across your desk, these are the types of things you really should be looking at too, and remembering to think about how they all work together for that holistic solution stack. And with that, I really want to thank you all for your time. I really do hope that you'll reach out and connect if you have any questions that I might not be able to answer on this call, or if you want to get involved in any ways. And there's my email address there as well. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Sabrina.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angel. This was great. And let's see, let me check out the Q&A. I think we have a few questions. Okay, so we have one question asking if the stickers are compostable.
Yeah, so because they are kind of using plant derived materials, they are compostable.
Another question, does Wingstop see an algorithm that suggests the snacky size as a loss in sales? Might they rely upon eyes bigger than stomach as a natural sales advantage?
Oh, interesting. That's a great question. I don't know the direct answer to that. But I would say I don't think so. only because, again, they want to provide the customer with exactly what they're looking for and not limit them with just certain combos or certain things they can only get. And I think that has given them a competitive edge because more and more reports are showing that customers want customization. And we see that all throughout other parts of our lives, right? You can customize all elements of your phone, the color and the apps and all those things. So I think we're seeing that translate also into dining experience where customers want customization.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, another question. Are active and intelligent packaging fully recyclable or even biodegradable?
So we did talk about the stickers, which is the active packaging. I will say, I think I'm not as familiar with the bio ink sensors. I do think they are because they are made of biodegradable materials, but whether or not they're safe to put in composting, that information I don't have, but I am happy to talk to the companies that we know to learn more about that.
Okay, great. Are
And
you
maybe,
able to?
sorry, maybe one thing I'll just add to that, because I know there is a concern, and we should be, right? We should be thoughtful about packaging and the trade-offs of packaging. I will say there have been some studies to show that even with additional packaging, the benefits of actually making sure that food is actually consumed has a greater impact at the end. And that's kind of the end goal. So we do want to make sure we are thinking about all the trade-offs and minimizing them as much as possible. But I will say, as long as we're preventing food from going to waste in the first place and ensuring that it's being consumed, that can have the bigger impact.
Right. Okay, great. Have any technologies developed for processors and retailers been adapted for consumer use?
So for at least of the ones that I've covered today, especially on the packaging side, I will say there are some solutions that are out there for shelf life extension that can use at home. Most of the time, though, they're just these sachets that people can buy in bulk and use to help extend the shelf life of your produce.
Right. And are you able to speak about policy solutions as well?
I don't know if people can speak, but maybe tell me more about what you are looking for on policy solutions. I think in general, policy is an important lever to reducing food waste, and they, I will say, need to be crafted really properly. And we've seen some strong policies written. I think SB 1383 is a great example of that. But it needs to be written so that it is both encouraging behavior change, but matched with the infrastructure that is available, or there needs to be infrastructure available, right? So that if you're requiring everyone to compost, there's actual infrastructure available. And then making sure that all of that information is clearly communicated. So I would say there's that. And then relatedly, I don't know if this gets to your question, but we have seen some at city and state level doing some great work to promote innovation through different grant programs and things like that.
Did answer two questions just over typing. I sent the link to the ReFed Summit registration information. I'll also put that in the chat right now. And then we had someone ask about how to apply for grants with you, and I can direct you all to this version of the ReFed website that will have more information on the catalytic grant funds. And Angel talked about this as well towards the end of her presentation. Let's see if we have any more.
And it looks like Brian sent the policy finder, which is super helpful. I don't know if you could send that through, Sabrina.
Yeah, for sure. So many great resources.
Oh, I think Brian also asked a great question about food prices as a pressing problem. Brian, that's a great question, and it is a pressing problem, but I think the challenge, though, is that the solutions that exist today for consumers, for them, don't directly solve kind of that need that they have, to figure out, right, how to use, to do their food differently. I think they're just, it's again, it takes too much time, right? Like even if you're storing things, you're going to have to track it in this app and look at all these different things. And then again, some of it's actually even more expensive to purchase. So we haven't seen food prices be that key motivator, because I don't think they're associating it with some of the solutions out there that we are seeing that can reduce food waste. I hope that answers your question.
Also going to put in the chat the link for our year one survey. If everyone can please fill that out when you have a time, I'll also send it out via email. And I think we may have gotten to all the questions. Let me just double check. I see Brian also shared with us a recent study that was conducted on the cost of food waste to families. I'll enter that into the chat as well for anyone interested in checking that out. Awesome. Yeah, I think we're all set.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sabrina.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. This was a great webinar, and thank you to all of our attendees. We look forward to seeing you all in October.
Great. Have a great
Thanks.
day. Take care.
You too. Bye. Bye, everyone.